of the border. In June 2010, Sergio Hernandez was playing with friends, daring each other to run to the border fence, touch it, and run back. That's when Border Patrol agent Jesus Mesa opened fire, killing the 15-year-old. In 2011, the teen's family sued the U.S. government, arguing their son's Fourth Amendment rights were violated. But the district court dismissed the case. The Justice Department claims the agent acted in self-defense since nearby smugglers were throwing rocks at him. Some 4 years later, in April 2015, the Fifth Circuit Court upheld that ruling, stating the Fourth Amendment did not extend to Hernandez as he was in Mexico at the time of his death. But on October 11th of last year, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, which brings us to today. Joining us now, former Assistant District Attorney and former U.S. Navy JAG. Brian Claypool is also with us, a criminal defense attorney, and these two have very different opinions on this case. Philip, first of all, the Supreme Court, in agreeing to take the case, basically says, hey, there's a significant legal issue here. What is that issue boiled down?
Well, boiling it down, John, really it has to do with a ruling that had to do with some immigrants that were not immigrants, they were detainees at Gitmo. And they basically said they had a right, some due process rights, habeas corpus rights to have their day in court. And the Supreme Court said yes, because the base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, was de facto American soil, even though it's located in Cuba. This is not the same thing. Mexican soil is Mexican soil. Mexican soil, whether it's 5 feet, 20 feet, a continent away, it's not U.S. soil. It's not controlled by the United States, and constitutional rights cannot be exported across the border. Not the Fourth Amendment, not the Fifth Amendment, none of them. I'm sorry that the child died. That's very unfortunate. Everybody agrees on that, but this is not about the facts of the case. It's about a much more important, larger legal principle about how far does the United States Constitution extend, and it does not go beyond the border.
Well, Brian, I think you have a different opinion on that. You think that constitutional rights of Americans do apply to Mexicans.
Hey, John, this is a classic case where logic should trump legalities. This isn't a case about the U.S. Constitution. This is a case about humanity. We live in a country, John, that implores other nations to engage in human rights, to not kill other people needlessly. Yet we're going to set an example in this case that it's okay for a Border Patrol agent to murder an unarmed 15-year-old who's playing, who posed no risk to this Border Patrol officer. And on top of that, John, this Border Patrol agent Mesa lied. He said that the kids were throwing rocks at them. They weren't. But what's more important here, John, is that the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution does apply. In fact, the 3-panel circuit court in New Orleans held that this family did have a constitutional right to pursue this lawsuit because under the Fifth Amendment, it applies to any people. And the Fifth Amendment, John, talks about where if the government abuses power, where it engages in conduct that shocks the conscience, that a family would have a right to sue even though they were 60 feet on Mexican territory. And I agree with that 3-court panel's ruling.
I want to show you some video from about 9 years earlier. This is not this particular case, but 2001 shows some, Mexican kids, I guess you would say, throwing rocks at Border Patrol agents who are trying to, and you can see the agent pulls his gun there. I mean, these are not little pebbles. These guys are throwing some pretty significant rocks that could do a lot of damage if they hit one of these agents. That kind of thing, Philip, happens all the time. So who's to say that it wasn't front and center in the mind of the agent who ended up, shooting this little kid tragically?
Well, for my colleague, Mr. Claypool, to say this was murder is beyond the pale, because this was examined very closely for this very reason by the Justice Department, the Obama Justice Department, I might add, that concluded that this was a self-defense. And he could not be prosecuted successfully under federal homicide laws. He could not be prosecuted under criminal laws having to do with violations of constitutional rights, because there are no constitutional rights. It's not really about the facts of this case, though. Yeah. My friend is thinking with his heart, which is fine, but he needs to be thinking with his mind, because if you extend Fourth Amendment privileges to non-citizens outside of the United States, then the Navy SEALs would have had to have a search warrant to go after bin Laden. There would have to have a warrant every time they use a drone strike. The CIA would need a warrant every time they wanted to do surveillance in a foreign country against a foreign national. So it's just not workable to say that aliens outside of the United States have constitutional rights, the same rights that you and I enjoy as we sit here within the continental United States.
Brian, I know you want to get into this, but we are out of time for today, I'm afraid. The Supreme Court is taking up this case, and I'm sure it's going to be in the news a lot. We'll get you back another time to discuss it. Brian Claypool, Philip Holloway, thank you both.
Thank you.